Well, it's safe to say that one team above all at the start of the season was really let down by their car. Well, actually, apart from Alpine.
How is this for a plan? We make terrible cars. In every way, horrible.
Très horrible.
Oh, nasty, unreliable.
And that would be Mercedes F1. However, since going back to the drawing board and figuring out how to really solve the issues of their car, all of a sudden they started winning and they just could not stop.
Lewis, it's hammer time.
Lewis Hamilton wins the British Grand Prix!
So Mercedes came into 2024 with actually quite a successful venture last season. In 2023, they managed second in the Constructors' Championship, and in a season that was very much dominated by Red Bull. They didn't get any wins, but they got quite a few podiums, and to come second out of every other team, it's the best of the rest, and that's all you could have really done last season, just pipping Ferrari on the final race of Abu Dhabi. So they could have been really happy, because Ferrari technically should have got that second place. So going into 2024, people weren't really expecting massive things from Mercedes, but they still thought they'd be podium contenders. But something just didn't click during the winter break, and they came into the first half of the season only managing a highest of 6th in Miami and Imola for Hamilton, without including sprint races, as yes, he did come second in the Chinese sprint race, but sprint races don't really matter that much, so I'm not going to take them into account. And a highest of 5th place for Russell in Monaco and Bahrain. I mean, it was just that dreadful. They were nowhere near the McLarens or the Ferraris or the Red Bulls, really. They were sort of in no man's land, where multiple races, it would be Red Bulls, McLarens, Ferraris, and then like a 10 to 20 second gap to the nearest Mercedes, and then you have the other Mercedes, and then a 20-30 second gap. That's why you'd see them getting a lot of fastest laps over the first few races, because they could just do a free pit stop and go for it, such as in Imola, which is exactly what they did. And then to put even more salt into the wound, coming away from Imola, they were only 4th in the Constructors' Championship with 79 points overall, which meant they were closer to Aston Martin in 5th than McLaren in 3rd place. And by all means, McLaren's start to the season wasn't amazing as well, and they were 75 points off even McLaren. And the thing that was scaring a lot of Mercedes fans was they were bringing upgrades and they just weren't working. The first massive package of upgrades in Miami just did not go so well, considering how McLaren brought their upgrades and completely revamped their season. So the main upgrade they actually started working on was their front wing for the Canadian Grand Prix, and it really is what brought them much closer to the main contender at that point, which was Verstappen in the Red Bull. And it did the exact same thing, revolutionizing the Mercedes car only a few races later, and they got extremely unlucky to not come away with a win in the Canadian Grand Prix. But by all means, it wasn't a bad race. They got their first podium of the season. Yes, they did bottle a win, but it was looking good. They looked like they were faster than the Ferraris. They looked like they were in prime position to be fighting McLarens. However, it was a rainy race, so people were wondering if they could keep up this form going into the next race. And to put it lightly, that's exactly what they did. So their whole plan for that part of the season as well was to bring tiny upgrades to each and every race going into the summer break. That 100% worked. In Barcelona, we had Russell starting P3, had a blistering first lap, getting into first place before the first corner, putting a massive start on for the fight between Red Bull and McLarens. Yes, they didn't have as much pace as they had in Canada, but they came away again with another podium, the second podium of the season, 2 in a row since they brought their big upgrades. And remember, 2 more than they had for the whole first 7 races of the season. And then moving on to the next race in Austria, again they got quite lucky with Russell winning this Grand Prix. but by all means, they were just in the right place at the right time. Again, another podium, well actually, because it was a race win for George Russell. Yes, it was because Norris and Verstappen did collide, so they took each other basically both out of the race, but Russell was in a pit stop distance between those two. He wasn't that far away off, and that's all you need to be in for the fight. And if none of that happened, it still again would have been another podium. And then you'd think after Barcelona and Austria, where they didn't have as much pace as they had in Canada, it'd slow down a little bit, but actually it just ramped up even more. Russell and Hamilton qualified P1 and P2 for their home Grand Prix, and Hamilton won the British Grand Prix. He really showed everyone and the critics that he still has it, because a lot of people were questioning what Hamilton was doing this season. His first half of the season of this first half, so the first 7 races, were pretty woeful. But since then, he's won 2 of the last 3 Grand Prix in a Mercedes that actually did deserve it on pace. In Silverstone, again, McLaren and Red Bull were still up there in pace, but Mercedes just had their car perfectly spot on for those tricky conditions, and Hamilton is such a great driver that he went and delivered another 25 points added to their collection. Sadly for Russell, he got a DNF because he was extremely unlucky. He had an issue with his car, meaning he had to retire. And then again, going into Spa, technically Mercedes got a 1-2. The first 1-2 of the season for Mercedes, their first 1-2 for a long time, and it wouldn't be the first team to do it, but all in all, they still came out with a win from Lewis Hamilton, again showing he was the fastest car on the grid. Verstappen and Norris couldn't do anything as they were starting a bit further back. And just to think again, to reiterate, 3 of the last 4 race wins have been a Mercedes F1 car. They didn't even get higher than 5th before Imola, and for a season where we had written it off of Verstappen dominance, it's just incredible how much Mercedes and even McLaren and even Ferrari have put the fight to Red Bull. And then I mentioned this in the Oscar Piastri video, that he had 114 points in the last 7 races. Well, Lewis Hamilton has 115. Now, George Russell, not as much, but again, it's sort of not his fault. But for a Mercedes F1 driver to have 115 points, the second most behind Verstappen by 1 point, incredible turnaround of form. And honestly, I'm just loving it at the minute. It's incredible being able to watch F1, not knowing going into a race weekend who's going to be at the top. Will it be Mercedes? Will it be Red Bull? Will it be McLaren? Ferrari maybe? I mean, I don't think it would be them, but it's just an incredible feeling. And just to put it into context again, Mercedes are sitting now on 266 points in the Constructors' Championship. Not too shabby. That's a jump of 187 points from the first 7 races to the last 7 races we've just had. Incredible turn of form. That's better than what McLaren's turnaround was. And it doesn't feel like it's that crazy of a turnaround because it is Mercedes. You know, McLaren were terrible last few seasons, but Mercedes really has to be talked about. Not in the same light, but still recognised for how incredible their performances have been in the last few races. And it's really exciting because they're pushing Ferrari for that 3rd place in the Constructors' Championship. And I really do think if Ferrari don't get their upgrades right going into the final parts of the season, Mercedes will finish 3rd in the Constructors' Championship. You very much could have a Constructors' Championship looking like McLaren right at the top, Red Bull 2nd place, closely followed behind with Mercedes, and then we'll see where Ferrari end up. I don't think they're going to do too well, but after their dreadful start to the 2024 season, I think Mercedes would take a 3rd place behind Red Bull, beating Ferrari, not too shabby. But it also does mean I think Hamilton will be a little bit salty going to Ferrari. I mean, he will want to go to Ferrari just because it's Ferrari, but Mercedes look like the better team right now. But who knows, it's been flip-flopping so much. Wouldn't be surprised if it changes for the 2025 start of the season. And now I've spoken about this a little bit as well, but we need to talk about the Russell issues, because Mercedes have been doing this domination and it could have been even better. Russell has lost so many points, not even for stuff he can control. Austria, he had very good luck, and like I said, I think he's used all of it up there, because then he had his DNF in Silverstone. He was out in Q1 in Hungary due to team issues and sort of his own issues as well, because he should have set a better lap as well. Again, disqualified in Spa for having an underweight car, and all of these issues cost Mercedes definitely 43 points, a 2nd place and a 1st place, but also potentially up to 10 points extra. Mercedes have lost about 50 to 60 points in the last few weekends. So for them to be on 266 points, they could be on about 326 points now, pushing Ferrari. And who knows, if they had got all of these results, they could have been pushing McLaren and Red Bull for that top position in the Constructors. I don't think they'll be able to beat McLaren, but my God, wouldn't it be fantastic to end this season with McLaren as first place Constructors, then Mercedes, and then Red Bull. Oh, Red Bull would be fuming keeping Perez for that. I know it's not a money thing, but I feel like it's just a pride thing that they need to focus on a bit more. But anyway, going into the second half of the season, like I said, it's just really exciting not knowing who's going to be on top, especially in this top group of cars. I just can't remember the last time the top 8 have really had a shout for pole position, for wins in F1. It was ages ago. It was a long time ago. You have to go back to the start of the 2010s era. So I'm just so happy that we get to watch this. And I really do think that Mercedes will carry on with this form. And let's see what they can do. My prediction is they'll come third in the Constructors' Championship. I believe Lewis Hamilton will overtake both Leclerc and Sainz. I don't think he'll be able to get past Piastri or Norris. So he'll finish 4th in the Drivers' Championship. And I do think Russell will have better form coming back in. He'll overtake Perez. Maybe the Ferraris, we'll have to wait and see. But by the end of the season, Perez is going to be miles down and the Mercedes are going to be loving life. Bring on 2025, that's all I can say. This end of the 2024 season is going to be great, but my God, this battle between Verstappen, McLaren, Mercedes and potentially Ferrari in 2025, if they all get their cars right at the start of the season, bring it on. But what do you all think about Mercedes' season so far? Am I hyping it up a little bit too much? Do you think they should have just been doing better at the start, considering the recent history of this team? I think they're pushing in the right direction. Carry on with these upgrades. We'll see what happens. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all later.